Hey, deserving listeners, this is Chapter 6 in our deep dive on the psychology of Elon Musk. Let's get into it. This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist, a professor, and a YouTuber.
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and I lay organic fiber optic cable.
So, this is 2008 we have reached at. He's 37, and this is his worst year yet, on paper anyway. So SpaceX had 3 failed attempts to get his rocket into orbit, and they only had enough money for one more try, and they only had enough money for like another month of operations before SpaceX had to close its doors or something. Tesla was also failing, 2008. Investors were so concerned with the viability of Tesla that they were pressuring Elon to just cut their losses and downsize to just a battery company. So that was also because they hadn't sold any cars yet.
Yeah.
Also, what else do you remember about 2008, Berto?
Oh, let's see. Something about housing markets.
Yeah.
I can't
Vague memory.
Like, I might have been affected by it in some ways. Oh, yeah. Yeah, the world ended. The world collapsed. Oh, my gosh.
It's hard to remember when I was going, through my notes on this. It took me a second to remember just how apocalyptic it was.
Yeah.
Experts were viably saying that we could enter into the worst depression that
Mad Max.
This country and the world, the world has ever had.
Yeah.
It could even be a tipping point into a regression to the Stone Age in some ways, because industries could fall apart, governments could fall apart, people could run out of food, supply chains could end. All of our infrastructure is dependent on all these systems working together. But even with that, investing and commerce, it was failing, and it affected me because people stopped wanting to pay for therapy.
Yeah, of course.
I went from 2007 having a full-time practice that was thriving and had been for years. Yeah. I remember at the end of 2008, and I had 2 clients. I've talked about this before.
Yeah.
I had 2 clients.
Oh my God.
I had a mortgage, I had a car payment, I had bills.
But you had a thriving podcast.
I started the podcast that year, and that was losing money. I mean, not much, but
It wasn't making anything.
time and material expense and that kind of. And probably you were losing money too, because you were probably paying for for the podcast.
Oh, yeah. That's
money.
The least. That's like
I think you were paying like $10 a month for the website server or something.
That's like stepping on gum on the sidewalk.
But you lost a lot of money that year too.
Oh my God, dude! I mean, I went. Have you heard of the Titanic? Have you heard of like the Abyss? Yeah, no, I lost. So before in 2006, like everyone, I thought I was a genius real estate investor. I had multiple places with renters and things, and it all collapsed. I decided in 2007, fall of 2007, I decided to leave my job and work, by myself basically. And it was a great time. It was a great time to do that.
Because you had the foundation.
Yeah.
One, your wife worked as well, but you also had the foundation of these investments, which were on paper anyway.
And what could go wrong?
In terms of your business, you depended on people being enthusiastic about investing.
That's right.
Speculative.
That's right.
Which depends on the economy.
And I put in everything. I dumped everything I had into investments right before the crash. And so basically 2008 was a very interesting year. Some great stuff. Hey, man, we were playing in our band that year.
We started a podcast.
Some great stuff. We started the podcast. And a great year of loss as well.
Yeah.
A great year
2008
of loss.
was also the year that our CD came out.
That's right.
I forgot that was the same year.
So it was a great year of productivity and great accomplishments. And
you can listen to that CD on Spotify.
And
the
iTunes.
Band is called Missionary.
Yeah, although if you search for Missionary, you're going to get like a bazillion things.
Look for Talk to the Girl by
Missionary, Talk to the Girl, or All for You, Missionary, All for You. I am super proud of this album. Honda wrote half the songs. I wrote half the songs. We sang and played on each other's songs. So anyways, but I lost a lot that year, a lot. So yeah, painful year. painful year and beautiful.
Yeah. So it was also a bad year for Elon Musk.
Yeah.
SpaceX was weeks away from folding, which was a big deal, not only to his life purpose, but also he had put, remember,
All his money, yeah.
almost all of his money, 100 million. Also in this year, he gets a divorce. So I want to focus on the divorce because this might illuminate things about Elon's personality.
Yeah.
When it comes to one's public persona on Twitter or a politician, you just never really know if that's a reflection of their personality or if it's what they're doing to get votes or to get fame or to get marketing interest or something. The way people behave at home will tell you a lot about what they're really like. And if you're going through a divorce, then you're going to, if you had an honest story from the former spouse, you would at least get a filtered, biased version of the worst moments. The worst moments of our lives are when we're going through a break. The worst behavior we'll ever engage in. A lot of, unfortunately, murders will happen to women in breakups, that kind of thing, or threatening of breakups. So we are at our worst. We're hurt, we're demoralized, we're angry. There's a lot at stake in terms of kids and money and that kind of. So I, really wanted to find out from Justine, and fortunately we do have some data to point to. So the context that I want to provide going into the divorce is that, remember that his businesses were on the brink of failure, and that would be stressful to anybody.
Yeah.
There are people who will kill themselves or contemplate killing themselves over just that. But his whole life was oriented around this. He didn't have other things in his life.
Yeah.
I don't know if he even cared that much about his marriage or his kids. I don't know that. Maybe he cares a lot, but I don't hear that in the story of Elon Musk, that he's, a work-life balance kind of guy.
Right.
He works a lot, and now he must have been working even more, right, to desperately try to keep things afloat. There's a lot of stress. Also, the humiliation and the embarrassment to himself, to his dad. His dad, even up till that point, I think was ridiculing him, certainly before that, growing up. Not only was his dad, "You're an idiot, you'll never amount to anything," but computers are stupid. His dad would ridicule him for being interested in computers when he was a kid, or being interested in technology, that kind of stuff. I would speculate that he had already suppressed all of his suffering and pain over the years, of which undoubtedly there was a lot. He had never been to therapy.
Yeah.
We hear from Justine that even after the death of their child, Elon did not grieve openly. He didn't, what you would want to hear of a healthy human being is at some point, maybe not right away, that Elon and Justine would express their emotions that are naturally there and seek support and help, right? Like, at least, if Justine was like, well, he didn't turn to me, but he did turn to his mom, or he did turn to his friend, or he did blog about it or something. There's none of that. He's just completely stuffed up.
Right.
So he's suffering just that alone. He seemingly has no way of soothing his emotions other than working harder. That's his one thing as a distraction, but also to just get through the day, I think. He doesn't use substances. Later, he would use ketamine, which I think is along these lines. But at this point, I don't think he was doing that. And this is a very stressful time. So Justine's account, this is from her book and from an essay that she wrote for Marie Claire, published in 2010. So this is, pretty fresh off of the divorce. So she says, he had grown up in the male-dominated culture of South Africa. Elon's judgment overruled mine. So she's talking about some of the factors that led to the divorce. So she's saying that he grew up in a sexist society and that Elon's judgment overruled mine. And he was constantly remarking on the ways he found me lacking. So remember, the reports of his childhood, when he first started to socialize as a kid, was described as him pointing out that other kids have flawed thinking.
Yeah.
and his dad, "You have flawed thinking. You're an idiot." Okay. And then she says, "I would say, I'm your wife, not your employee." And then he would say, if you were one of my employees, I would fire you.
Yeah.
So it's hard.
Isn't this the wife that he, when they were getting married on their wedding, like their honeymoon or whatever, told her, I am the alpha?
Right. They're dancing at their reception. And he says, I am the alpha. And I think she thought he was joking at first, but then figured out he's not joking. It's hard to know what the context was there. I've never heard him comment on that. He might have been saying, well, yeah, that's not good, but it was in the midst of a fight because she was doing, who knows?
Yeah.
But it's definitely not surprising that a guy would have sexist attitudes and would have ideas about the roles in a family, and also just given the way that he sees himself, which is that he's the smartest guy in the room. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She goes on to say, Elon was obsessed with work. When he was home, his mind was elsewhere. I longed for deep and heartfelt conversations, for intimacy and empathy. And then she wrote that in the beginning, he used to be so supportive, but not anymore. So that's kind of interesting, right? So it's not that he's incapable of being supportive and maybe a little bit of empathetic or at least connected. But like many marriages, unfortunately, you grow distant, and the avoidant person will start to shut down for various. We don't know why he did that. I would guess that work was a factor because he had never had, from the story, he didn't have a girlfriend prior of any sort. I mean, maybe he had some short-term partners. It'd be strange if he hadn't, but...
Well, he certainly had someone when he got the McLaren, because I remember video footage.
That was her. It was Justine.
Oh, okay. So you're right. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. I think they were engaged at the time.
Okay.
So who knows? But there's a chance that he had never really, especially that long of a relationship.
Yeah.
And given his history of trauma, maybe affected a little bit by his autism, and couple that with never any help with his autism growing up, that it was hard for him to navigate those waters, because those waters are difficult. For people that you've been through a lot of abuse and neglect growing up, right?
Yeah.
And when you get married and you're young and you're in your 20s and 30s, it gets complicated, right?
Oh, yeah.
It starts to come up. And think about how much therapy and how long it took and how it's still a work in progress.
Yeah.
Elon has done none of that, and arguably, not to put this on a spectrum, but the shit that this guy went through was, like I said earlier, I'm a therapist. I've heard the stories. This is top end, high end
really
level of trauma that he went through. So he, not to excuse it, but he was supportive in the beginning, and he's not anymore. That's Sessa. It's not that she's saying from the very beginning he was never very supportive. She's saying, I liked the old Elon, but now it was different. Because we can imagine some other public figures, we won't name names, who we might imagine if their partner or former partner, if they were allowed legally, given NDAs, to tell their opinion, they might say, well, from the beginning, he wasn't very supportive.
Sure. I mean, one of the factors is that at the beginning of their relationship, he didn't have yet many signals telling him, you're great, you're great, you're great. Now, even though he's going through a rough time right now, he had already sold 2 companies for ridiculous amounts of money. So that would be figuring in his ego going, I'm so great. And so therefore, I'm just going to notice more how not great everyone else is, including my partner. So I could easily see that being a factor as their relationship progressed.
Right. And furthering of that argument is that I haven't gone into these details, but in the biographies and the interviews, and even in this piece in Marie Claire by Justine, it looks like for Elon, he felt suddenly like he had friends, maybe for the first time in his life, right? But they weren't like friends. They were party. This is when he was starting to go out to all the high-end parties, the tuxedos and the actors and
meeting the Google guys.
Politicians were coming up to him and wanting to talk to him, and Leonardo. I don't know if Leonardo DiCaprio, but big stars.
Yeah,
he was hanging out. He was one of them.
Oh, George Clooney was one of the first people to buy a Tesla.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's events all the time, and there's maybe like dinners and lunches and golf games or whatever, and he is seemingly wanting Justine to be a pretty wife at his side. Maybe as he looks around at all these high-powered guys, they have a pretty wife that is quiet and sits nicely at their side. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the way that Justine talks about it is that was a theme of their life, was that she was just like an appendage, and the only kind of messaging she got from him was for her to be pretty and to dye her hair and to just be quiet. And the boys are about
Nice.
smart, important stuff now. So how insecure he was, you could imagine that he might kind of start to obsess about that, about how do I get people to like me? How do I stay in this circle?
Yeah.
How do I get these people to think that I'm cool like them? You just imagine.
Totally. I mean, and this phenomena at the time must have been happening, where people that were very powerful or popular or famous people coming to him saying, so incredible what you're doing. You're one of the good guys. You're really, and that must have had a double effect. One, building his ego, right? But also, like, imagine the threat of like, wait, why are you giving me compliments? Oh gosh, now I got to step up. And oh, who's around me? Oh, she's not doing her part. She doesn't look the part. It puts you in a panic mode, even though in theory you should be like, oh yeah, this is great. And
right.
And
he's on the verge of complete failure,
right,
which would make it so he's no longer invited to any of these things.
Right.
Berto, let's take a break. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right, we're back from the break. So she goes on. So she says he's obsessed with work and that she longed for empathy and deep conversations. She never said that they used to have deep, intimate conversations. So I wonder about that, but that's what she wanted. I'm guessing that she was young. They were both in their 20s when they decided to get married. It sounded like she hadn't really figured out who she was and what she wanted in a marriage. I'm guessing that as the marriage progressed, she started realizing, I want a different sort of. So even if Elon was trying, I'm guessing she would have been dissatisfied just because he's not that sort of person that would sit down and have an emotional, intimate, connected conversation. But that's just speculative. She goes on to say, when we argued over the house or the kids' sleeping schedule, my faults and flaws came under the microscope. I felt insignificant in his eyes. So that's just more of the pattern there. And that's from her perspective. You talk to anyone when they go through a divorce, you're going to hear stuff like that. In the best of cases. I mean, people don't get divorced because things are going well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now I'm not defending him, but I'm just sort of pointing that out. Going on with her essay, she writes, no matter how many highlights I got in her hair, Elon pushed me to be blonder. He kept saying, go platinum, and I kept refusing. So I've already talked about maybe some motivation there, but this is also a narcissistic thing where narcissistic people, not all of them, will feel like they're competing with everyone else in terms of how attractive their spouse is. And so they will pressure their spouse to be as attractive as possible because they're trying to compete. They're trying to present as superior with sort of like when Patrick Bateman is obsessing on the card.
The cards, yeah.
Everyone wants an attractive business card, right? But for Patrick Bateman, it's like
everything.
And you hear the internal suffering that he's what's the line again?
So
my mind, or what's the internal dialogue?
Yeah, when he's saying is like, I can't believe Price prefers Van Patten's card. Yeah.
Doesn't he say something? I'm literally falling apart on the inside.
Well, you might be thinking of, I'm on the verge of tears as we arrive at a spot. It's a different scene.
Oh, it's a different narcissistic thing.
But in that moment, he's sweating. He's looking at the card. The thing that affects him the most is that what you might call his best friend prefers the other guy's card to his. And that's what's affecting him the most, let alone when they pull out Paul Allen's card.
Right. Going on with her essay. In the spring of 2008, 8 years after our wedding, a car accident served as my wake-up call. She describes in the essay how the other driver was distracted, I think, on her cell phone and just ran into Justine. There was a crunch of metal as her car plowed into mine. And when we skidded to a halt, my first thought wasn't, thank God no one's hurt. It was, my husband is going to kill me.
Oh. Yikes.
What do you think about that?
Oh, man. Yeah, I could see how that would be a wake-up call. Oh, my gosh. Wow.
But what does that say about Elon's behavior?
Well, that from her perspective, everything is more important to him than her and her well-being. Like, of course, the biggest thing in that moment for someone who's not going through something like that would be, oh my God, thank goodness I'm alive. It might also include like thinking about their family, right? But yeah, thinking.
But
like,
remember, they're filthy rich. So buying another car or fixing
I know.
And plus, it's not even her fault. The other person probably is going to pay for the car.
But even if you were poor,
yeah,
like even
totally.
if you were poor, it's like the fact that you would think, oh my God, I'm dead. Like,
right. This is a sign of verbal abuse, emotional abuse.
Yeah.
When you feel in a situation like that and you're scared,
yeah,
it's sort of like you have a kid who spills milk accidentally and they fly into a panic that their parents are going to, explode in anger.
yeah,
Some people might be able to relate to that. That's a sign. You don't have that immediate fear in that kind of situation when there's so many other competing things to focus on and emotions without having your neurology wired to that intimidation and that fear, right?
Yeah.
So that says something. That the criticism must have been sharp and frequent. So in the essay, I'm going to paraphrase. She talks about how she told him after this that she wasn't happy in the marriage. She wanted to improve the marriage, and she convinced him to enter counseling. She had been in counseling for a while, and she had really come to love it. She said that one of the nannies saw her suffering and said, you need to go to therapy.
Oh my God. Can you imagine a third party, someone you pay, so they would be reticent to bring something up like that, is so moved by watching what you're going through that they're like, you may need therapy.
Right. It just makes me wonder what they saw, what the nanny saw, you know? I don't know. So then she writes, this is him going to therapy. 3 sessions later, he gave me an ultimatum. Either we fix this marriage today or he would divorce me. So basically, I think from the account, he was saying, I don't want to go to therapy. And he has stated publicly that he would never go to therapy. And I think that's because he knows that therapy means facing what he has stuffed and stuffed and stuffed. And it's
facing death.
Yeah, it's so painful as you get ever closer to the trauma, right? And given his socialization, he doesn't have hope or doesn't have the knowledge or the emotional intelligence to think, well, it'd be better off for me in the end if I do kind of face this. So I think that's one thing. I think also, as I've seen this a lot with clients of mine, I think he's like, I don't want to lose her, but I can't do what she's asking me to do. I don't know what to do. She wants me to change. She wants me to face my emotions. She wants me to open up. That's not going to happen because of my massive amounts of trauma reactivity, and I don't even know where to begin with my emotions. But I also don't want to lose her. So can't we just go back to the way things were? And they don't recognize that their partner is at the end of a long series of struggles that resulted in them finally telling you, look, I'm not happy with this. So there's often an initial reaction from the Elon Musk of the world of just like, let's just go back to the way things were.
Let's fix things in a day.
Yeah.
Let's fix this today.
Or just deal with it. Just tell yourself it's fine and we'll be fine.
And it's also, he's gotten used to these kinds of ultimatums in business. Like, we got to close this today. If you don't drop the price of those parts in 10%, we're walking, right?
Okay, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah. And she apparently said, I can't do that. And, I can't go back to the way things were. And if you're not going to go to therapy, then I don't know what to do. And then he filed for divorce the next morning. So on one hand, it looks like he left her. And, he did in a lot of ways. But I've been through this with a lot of clients. And the way that I would characterize this is she actually left him. And not to say that he's like a victim of this, but he just saw the tea leaves and was just like, well,
you don't leave me, I leave you.
we might as well just end this.
Yeah.
Or it's too painful to be with you as I know that you don't like me. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of possibilities there. But I say all this because usually when we are breaking up with someone, not always, but often, we feel better about the current situation in the future than the person that we're dumping, right?
Right.
But there's a chance that for him, he is actually emotionally the dumpee. He feels like someone who got dumped because he's cruising along in this relationship. It's very distant, but it's working in his mind. Then she goes through this accident. She's going through therapy, and by the way, this is another seed planted in Elon Musk's mind that liberals and emotions and women and therapy ruins people. If she just hadn't gone to therapy,
Yeah, right.
because that's a very frequent.
Foo-foo science corrupted your brain.
It's a very frequent point of view of people like this, where it's like the therapist convinced, because unfortunately a lot of people in Justine's shoes, and I don't know if Justine did this, is like, my therapist says you have to change.
Sure.
And if I detect someone is about to do that, I say,
Don't say that.
although you're right, I did say that. If you want this to work, that's not, just state it from your heart. I would like you to.
My therapist says that you are an asshole.
Right, that kind of stuff. So,
By the way, I've been through at least two experiences like this where I technically ended things, but totally I felt like the dumpy still. One time, my biggest girlfriend in high school, I wrote the letter saying, hey, let's be done. But really, she had already left me, essentially. And another time, I mentioned this in one of the previous episodes here, in a band where I said, okay, I'm leaving, but I really felt like I'd been dumped.
Right.
And so just because you're the one filing for divorce, to your point, doesn't mean that you don't feel like,
Right. So I say this to add to the downward spiraling of Elon and his hope for relationships and his compounding traumas, right? He has yet to have a secure relationship. I don't think he had a secure enough relationship with his mom. I don't know that, but from accounts, it sounds like the mom was loving, but not particularly intimate and close and connected. Of course, he had a lot of trauma. He had no friends.
Yeah.
Maybe he felt some intimacy with his brother and maybe his sister. So I don't know, but it doesn't sound like it.
Yeah.
And then you finally, because for people like this, and I've had many clients like this, that it's possible that for Elon, his relationship with Justine was by far the best relationship he'd ever had in his life.
Sure.
To Justine, it was not ideal. It wasn't good enough. It wasn't intimate enough. It wasn't close enough. She felt overly criticized. I would imagine all that is credible and understandable in terms of her perspective. He, in his life, he's coming from, given all his traumas, a very stunted understanding of what relationships would look like.
Yeah.
To him, this is the pinnacle of marriage because he's not beating her. He's not beating the kids.
Yeah.
I mean, for people...
Vast improvement over the previous generation.
Yeah. What I say is that your spectrum of what's acceptable, the range of what's acceptable, gets skewed when you're shown a model that is so extremely on one end. So when you bring that range to a more healthy range, you feel, by contrast, we're great, but they have a long way to go for it to be actually ideal.
Yeah.
And also, given that he's been through no therapy and there's been no self-help as far as I know, he's just struggling to survive, and he's probably putting a fair amount of work into making the relationship as shitty as it was with Justine. He's probably holding back a lot. He's probably trying his best. And to have it fail and to have her essentially say, you're not good enough. That's not what she's saying, but that's how it could feel, right?
Right.
And he has no way out of that. That could be one of the most demoralizing experiences a person could ever have. It's tempting to look at it and say, well, he's Elon Musk. He has it all. He's rich. He's powerful. Why would we feel sorry for him? There's a chance that this moment was the worst moment in his entire life. You know, it's one thing to be beaten. It's like, well, my dad's evil. He was trying to make this work. He had 6 kids with her.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm just going to throw it out there. He's a human being. A lot of arrows are pointing towards someone that would just be destroyed by this and might not ever open up again. And he might start doubling down on the coping mechanisms of overworking.
Yeah.
Maybe needing more distractions as time goes on, like Twitter. Just going to throw it out there.
I saw an interview with, what's the name of the actor who was the main the father in Succession?
I forget his name.
Scottish guy, great actor.
Yeah.
He was talking.
He was in Super Troopers.
Oh yeah, he was in also Troy. I guess he was the
Agamemnon. I think
he's the one that calls out Achilles. Okay, they were asking about Donald Trump, and he said, of course, a lot of things about how terrible he is. But the one thing he said that I thought was so insightful was he said, "But ultimately, he is just a suffering, or he is a child who is hurt.
Yeah,
he is a very hurt child.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah."
Yeah,
and so it
doesn't mean you have to feel sorry for him.
No, it's just an explanation of
right.
like a way to look at things.
Yeah,
yeah.
So paraphrase here from this essay. Justine says that 6 weeks after filing for divorce, Elon texted her to say that he was engaged to a gorgeous British actress in her early 20s.
Nice.
Right. It's hard to say what this means. On the surface, it looks extremely immature,
vindictive,
and butthurt as well. Like, well, screw you.
Guess what I'm doing?
Yeah, the way that you would in 7th grade or something, But it's also possible that this points to an immaturity and a level of hurt, right? That he's so obsessed and racked with shame and anger and hurt, and he's just sitting there at home. He also happens to be dating this new woman, and he's just like, it's not unusual to have that impulse. It's just not typical that you would act on it, right?
Yep.
It's not strange, even for the most mature, differentiated person, to get dumped and then in a future relationship with someone want to like tell that past person like, I'm with someone better now, I'm happier now, or something.
Look at what you missed out on. Wait,
right.
I didn't miss out on her. I missed out on you, but I already was done with you. So,
right. So I don't know. It also could be a narcissistic thing. It could be some kind of lack of empathy, callous thing. I don't know, but it's hard to say. Let's take a break. When we get back, I want to conclude with watching a bit of her TED Talk in which she talks about Elon Musk, basically. What do you say?
Okay, let's do it.
All right, back from the break. So this is a TED Talk by Justine Musk, Elon Musk's ex-wife, and this is on the YouTube channel TEDx Talks. And I'm going to play the end of this 20-minute talk because it speaks to how she sees Elon Musk at this point. So, and this is in 2017. So this is 9 years after they got divorced, right, and 7 years after she wrote that essay for Marie Claire.
And their badass personalities, and their mad skills, and the mastery of their chosen subject matter.
Sorry, I should preface this by saying that her whole TED Talk is about geniuses.
Because in the beginning, we don't trust them because we think they're crazy. But by the end, we trust them because we know they're crazy. They're crazy enough to accomplish anything and risk it all in order to bring us something new to believe in. They might make lousy husbands and terrible wives. They might be the friend who never sends you a birthday present and forgets to show up for coffee. But they bring light to the dark, and they show us the universe.
Thoughts on that?
It's surprising.
Right?
Very surprising, yeah.
What are you surprised by?
That she ultimately is... Well, I don't know how... Because I didn't see the whole thing. I don't know if... I'm imagining that she's including Musk in that group.
Absolutely she is. I mean,
right?
She just referenced they don't make the best husbands.
Right.
They might not show up for your coffee date, but they give us the future.
Right. It's surprising that she's basically endorsing it in a way.
Right.
She's saying like, well, we need it. So you got to take the good with the bad. Take the medicine with the sugar.
And that is a common narrative. It was the same with Steve Jobs, right?
Right.
With Michael Jordan even. I have to say that I'm biased against this narrative, but I don't have any scientific reason to do so. I just philosophically think that I don't want to live in a world where this is true, that in order to achieve greatness or to be successful or to benefit society, you have to be a dick and you have to treat people like shit.
Yeah, I think there's a balance. I have to believe that there's a balance. I don't actually believe that someone who isn't a little bit draconian and overly driven can maybe achieve as much as someone who is, given the same skills. But I I also don't believe that the only people that can be truly instrumental in shaping our future have to be vicious to other people and ruthless and mean and evil or break laws. I don't believe that either.
Yeah. Some would argue that Steph Curry is one of the best, right? And I don't think that he's known for being a dick to everybody and trying to compete with everyone.
Yeah.
But are you surprised that she's basically throughout this entire TED Talk indirectly and kind of directly praising Elon Musk?
I am surprised.
Why?
Well, I would have thought two things. One, I would have thought that having spent a lot of time with him, she would have humanized him a hell of a lot more. Meaning like, well, I mean, I know the narrative, but I mean, he's just a human. And two, that she came out of it and many years later is like, yeah, that sucked, but I guess we need it. So, maybe it wasn't a good husband, but, we needed that person in our lives.
Yeah, and by reports, they were co-parenting their 5 kids. Mm-hmm. To me, what this says is that at this point, they're amicable.
Yeah.
What
it doesn't point to is her confirming, like, yeah, I mean, he's a psychopath. He was like, you want me to talk about him? Jeez, I have to be careful. I might be assassinated.
Or at the very least, not volunteering to praise him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because she might be afraid of him.
This points a lot more to what we were saying. Hurt child lashing out in totally unhelpful and unsanitary ways, mentally, that is. And then that leads to a divorce that is difficult and traumatic, but still within the range of a human that was suffering abuse.
Right. A relatable divorce
Yeah.
that we might see among people that we respect and like. Yeah. But their personality differences and his traumas resulted in what she would say is ultimately the main factor. Well, there are 2 main factors. One is the distance, and 2 was the hypercriticism. And those aren't great things, but unfortunately, those are pretty common reports from people, particularly people that are traumatized and never been through therapy. In some ways, one would say, and if we have Elon haters out there, I guess, trigger warning. But if I had a client like this, I would say to him, it's kind of a miracle that you weren't worse as a husband. Not that everyone going through trauma is doomed or something, but if this is the entirety of the report, verbal abuse is horrible, and let's put an end to that. But given that the father was extremely violent with his wives, or at least his first wife, Elon's mom, if I had a client like this, I would say, let's change and let's work on this, but I want you to really have some self-esteem based on the fact that you've managed to restrain yourself or to have a healthy perspective around things. You've obviously done things internally to resist being like your dad or worse than your dad, because a lot of people will be that way.
But it obscures the statistical reality that there are a lot of people that behave like Musk or worse that aren't the richest people on earth. I've ran into a lot of cases in business where you'll see these people that have power in their organization, and they mistreat and insult people that work for them. They're often not right, and oftentimes they flame out, and oftentimes. But one thing is that they're not all Elon Musk, So the attributes don't go hand in hand, in my opinion.
Right.
You can be a successful visionary without abusing people.
Yeah. Now, I will say it's possible that if you have significant traumas or a particular kind of childhood that makes it so that relationships and intimate relationships are difficult for you, that you're going to focus more on things that don't give you pain and maybe give you a little bit of self-esteem, like work or achieving some goal in sports or something. And among those millions of people around the planet, if you also have talent and you're in the right place, right time, then that will be that extra bump. I guess conversely, you take all the genius, talented people, right place, right time, and among the millions of them, and you take the ones that also have a hard time with relationships and are never going to go home, they're just going to stay in the office all day, then that might be that extra bump to get them into the stratosphere. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then, but you also hear stories of, so there was this visionary executive at a company that I won't name that was producing visionary, exciting hardware of the VR kind. this person was lauded externally and, man, just a genius. But internally, he was abusive to people like crazy. And eventually, a scandal broke and he was let go.
In his personal life?
In his professional life, because he had abused someone a little too much. This was a person that was seen as a visionary genius in their field and rose to prominence, and inside the company was, and yet he was an abusive asshole.
Yeah.
And everyone kind of knew it, but everyone looked the other way because, I mean, what are you going to do? It comes with the territory.
Right.
Until it was too much and he got let go because of the legal potential implications.
Another way to look at it is that if you have the talent and right place, right time, and the privilege and the resources, and you have a drive or a tendency to harm others, and you recognize that in order to harm others or get away with this stuff, you have to have power, then you might be particularly interested in getting that power so that you can harm other people.
Yeah.
So that's another way of looking at it. Anyway, so to summarize here, his life is falling apart in 2008. The economy is tanking. SpaceX is about to die. Tesla is about to die. The economy is horrible now and doesn't look like it's going to recover anytime soon. And the outlook looks terrible. And if it were to be terrible, even if he did manage to get a rocket to orbit Earth, or if he did manage to get a Tesla car on the market, there's a chance the economy will stay stagnant or depressed for a long time, and it won't matter, and the businesses will go under anyway, and any other business that he's trying to start. So things are looking pretty bad, but let's take a break. The rest of this episode will just be for patrons of the podcast, so if you want to hear the rest of this episode, become a patron by clicking the link below. Otherwise, please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.